She broke into my garage, then saw what was inside and collapsed. But that was just the beginning. This HOA Karen had no idea who she was messing with and what my secret was. I jolted awake, not to my alarm, but to the jarring shriek of metal from my garage. What in the world was that? It wasn't the gentle creak of a neighbor, but a rough, tearing sound, like someone was ripping the door open with force. Still in my sleep-softened slippers, my morning coffee forgotten, I felt a surge of disbelief. Who would be so utterly reckless as to break into my garage in broad daylight? Our HOA was infamous for its meddling, but this felt like a new low. For months, it had been trivial annoyances, demands about grass height, absurd complaints about my mailbox's color, and veiled threats about community standards. But the self-appointed HOA president, Brenda Maxwell, was the absolute worst. She wasn't even elected, just took over when the previous president vanished. Now she patrolled our street like a tyrant, her gaze sharp, her demands relentless. But this, violating my actual property, that crossed a line. I placed my mug down, my heart thumping, and crept to the window. There she was, Brenda, with her rigid blonde hair in a cheap floral shirt straining at the seams. In her hand, a crowbar. She was wrestling with my garage door, her face a mask of smug determination, like she was defusing a bomb or winning a championship. The sight was so preposterous I almost laughed, but I bit my lip, staying hidden. This wasn't just a simple trespass. Brenda had been circling for weeks, muttering about how I must be hiding something in my garage. I remember her stopping me in the driveway, her voice dripping with suspicion. "Why don't you ever open that door? The HOA has a right to know what's inside." I'd sarcastically quip back, "Oh, absolutely. I'll schedule a guided tour, complete with refreshments." And now here she was, apparently taking me up on the offer, minus the invitation. "Oh, Brenda, you have no idea what you're stumbling into." The moment she stepped over that threshold, she'd regret every single decision that led her to wield that crowbar. The door finally groaned open, and Brenda, hunched low like a cartoon burglar, slipped into the dimness. My eyes were glued to the scene through the blinds. 2 hesitant steps she took, then she froze, completely. The crowbar clattered to the floor, a metallic echo in the silence. Her hands began to tremble. I couldn't clearly see her face, but I could feel the icy wave of terror radiating from her, a palpable heat. It was only 3 seconds before her knees gave out. She stumbled back, braced herself against my workbench, and then just deflated onto the concrete, a heap of crumpled fabric. That was my cue. Calmly, mug back in hand, I strolled out my front door. The garage door still hung open, revealing Brenda, sprawled on the floor, eyes wide as saucers, fixed on something in the far corner. Her breath came in ragged gasps. "What on earth are you doing in my garage, Brenda?" I asked, my voice flat, almost bored. She couldn't speak, her gaze locked on the object. I followed her terrified stare, though I knew exactly what she saw. There, squatting in the shadows, was a massive, matte black, angular shape. Anyone with even a hint of knowledge about restricted government equipment would recognize it instantly. It wasn't truly dangerous, not in the way she imagined, but it certainly looked intimidating enough to stop a heart. Brenda's mouth flapped open and closed, gasping like a fish pulled from water. You can't have that. That's illegal," she finally stammered. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my coffee. "Illegal? No. Classified? Yes, but you, Brenda, are not cleared to know about it." Her eyes darted wildly between me and the object, her mind visibly short-circuiting. I, I have to report this. To the board, the police, the FBI." I knelt down, meeting her gaze. "Brenda, I'm offering you a piece of advice that could save you a mountain of trouble. Walk away. Forget you ever saw this. And for the record, breaking and entering? That's a felony." Her lips trembled. "The HOA. The HOA," I cut in, my voice firm, "has absolutely no jurisdiction over classified federal property or my garage. You've already committed a crime, Brenda. I suggest you leave before you add another one to your list." For once, she was speechless. Scrambling to her feet, She cast one last terrified glance at the corner, then bolted out the door and down the driveway. I watched her waddle across the street, disappearing into her house without a backward glance. Most would think that was the end. She saw something shocking, got scared, and left. But this was Brenda. If there was one thing she loved more than controlling people, it was proving she was right, even if it meant digging a hole so deep she'd never see daylight again. I knew the instant her door clicked shut, she was already plotting. What Brenda didn't know was the truth about the object. It wasn't a weapon, not truly dangerous, but it was incredibly valuable, so valuable that certain individuals would pay exorbitant sums to possess it. While I'd been content to keep it quiet, Brenda had just made herself a variable I couldn't ignore. That night, I saw the faint glow of her phone through her blinds. She paced, gesturing wildly towards my house, her silhouette twitching with furious excitement. I had a chilling suspicion she was making a call she would soon deeply regret. By morning, the neighborhood was buzzing. Whispers followed me as I drove by. My neighbor, Tom, gave me a nervous wave, mouthing, "Good luck." I didn't need to ask why. Brenda's chaos was unmistakable. Sure enough, an official-looking letter from the HOA appeared in my mailbox that afternoon. An urgent notice demanding I present my garage contents for inspection to ensure compliance with community safety standards. The meeting was set for 10 a.m. the next day in my driveway with all board members present. I actually laughed out loud. It was utterly transparent. She was trying to legitimize her break-in as an official duty. And from the wording, she'd clearly manipulated the other board members into believing she was acting in the community's best interest. But Brenda had a problem. I absolutely detest being cornered. If she wanted a public spectacle, I was more than happy to provide one. Just not the kind she envisioned. What I had planned would ensure Brenda thought twice before ever stepping foot on my property again. By 9:30 the next morning, my stage was set. Brenda's urgent inspection was scheduled for 10 and I knew she'd arrive early, eager to claim the moral high ground. I wanted her to see my preparations before the crowd, to let her believe she was in control. Nothing crushes someone more than thinking they've won, only to have the ground vanish beneath their feet. My car was parked on the street, leaving the driveway wide open. The garage door was closed, concealing the infamous classified object. Beside the driveway, I'd arranged 3 folding chairs for the board members, angled perfectly to face the door. On my porch, a cooler of bottled water, soft classical music playing from a small speaker, and a sign on the railing, "Private property, entry by invitation only." Petty, perhaps, but it perfectly set the tone. At 9:40, Brenda appeared, striding up the sidewalk, wearing her HOA president's sash. Yes, a real sash, navy blue with HOA president embroidered in gold. She only wore it for attention-grabbing events, making her choice today even more comical. Her face was tight with the smug certainty of someone about to deliver a knockout blow. "Morning, Brenda," I greeted her from the porch, sipping coffee as if I had all the time in the world. "This is a formal inspection," she declared, as if I hadn't read her letter. "For the safety of the community, I demand you open the garage immediately." "Formal inspection?" I repeated slowly, my gaze fixed on her. "On my property? Without a warrant? Without my consent? And after you broke in yesterday?" Her eyes flickered, just for a fraction of a second, but she quickly recovered. "The board voted unanimously to require compliance. You're hiding something dangerous, and we will find it," I smiled, making no effort to hide my amusement. "Oh, you'll see it, all right. But I think it's only fair the whole neighborhood gets to witness this brave display of community service." Her lips tightened, but she didn't back down. By 9:55, the other 2 board members arrived. Linda, looking utterly miserable, and Frank, a man clearly bewildered by what he'd gotten into. Brenda herded them into their chairs like a general deploying troops. Right on cue, neighbors began to trickle over. I'd casually mentioned the inspection to a few people last night, and the news had spread like wildfire. By 10 a.m., a solid crowd had gathered. Parents with toddlers, teenagers filming on their phones, even old Mr. Henderson with his lawn chair and a bag of popcorn. "Let's get this over with," Brenda barked. "Open the door." I stepped aside, remote in hand. "As you wish." The garage door began its ominous ascent. Everyone leaned forward, eager to glimpse the mystery. Brenda's face glowed with anticipation, utterly convinced she was about to expose me as a criminal. The door passed the halfway mark, and the object came into full view. Gasps rippled through the crowd. There it sat, a massive matte black steel container emblazoned with hazard stripes and stark stenciled letters. Property of U.S. government, restricted access. It looked like it had been torn straight from a top-secret military base. It even boasted a biometric lock and a small keypad with a blinking red light. Brenda shot to her feet. See? This is exactly what I was talking about. Dangerous. Illegal. Dangerous. I asked innocently. Brenda, you don't even know what it is. It doesn't matter. This is a residential neighborhood. You can't store whatever this is here. I tilted my head. Actually, I can. And before you make another accusation, perhaps you should know the truth. From the crowd, a voice boomed, "What's inside it?" Others chimed in, phones held high to capture every word. I took a slow, dramatic breath. This, I announced, walking over to the container, is a decommissioned training module used by the Department of Defense. It's completely inert. No weapons, no explosives, just a hunk of metal. I bought it legally at a government auction years ago. I keep it in the garage because I gestured at the imposing shape. Well, it makes people like Brenda nervous. And that, my friends, is worth every penny. A wave of laughter swept through the crowd. Brenda's face flushed the color of an overripe tomato. You admit you deliberately. I admit nothing illegal, I cut in. What I will say is that breaking into someone's property to snoop on their belongings is a criminal offense. And Brenda here didn't just break in. She damaged my garage door in the process. I have the security footage to prove it. The laughter died, replaced by a collective murmur. Brenda's eyes darted around, realizing the crowd's sentiment had turned against her. He's lying, she stammered, but her voice lacked all conviction. I pulled out my phone, tapped the screen, and the video started playing. Clear as day, it showed Brenda wedging the crowbar under the door, grunting with effort as she forced it open, then slinking inside. The crowd erupted again, this time with jeers. Wow, that's breaking and entering, someone shouted. Isn't that a felony? Another cried. Brenda's shoulders slumped, but she still clung to her fading authority. This was an official inspection. No, I snapped. An official inspection requires prior notice, written consent, and reasonable cause. What you did was illegal. And since you've decided to make this public, I think the public should also know that I've already filed a police report. Her mouth dropped open. You wouldn't dare. Brenda, I said with a thin smile, you broke into my garage because you thought you could intimidate me. Now you're standing here in front of half the neighborhood with proof of your crime playing on repeat. I'd say you've done all the daring for both of us. The crowd was absolutely captivated. Phones still filmed, kids whispered excitedly, and even Linda seemed to be suppressing a grin. Frank, meanwhile, looked like he was calculating how quickly he could vanish from this disaster. Brenda's voice cracked. I'll have you removed from the HOA. Good luck with that, I replied. The HOA's authority ends where my property line begins, and you've already crossed it, literally and legally. She stood there trembling, a pitiable figure torn between fury and utter humiliation. Finally, she spun on her heel and stormed off, leaving the abandoned folding chairs as a testament to her defeat. The board members followed, awkward and silent, while the crowd slowly dispersed, buzzing with the kind of juicy gossip that spreads faster than wildfire in our neighborhood. As the last of them left, I closed the garage door and let out a long breath. The plan had unfolded perfectly. Public embarrassment, undeniable proof, and enough witnesses to utterly shatter her reputation. But I knew Brenda. This wasn't over. She wouldn't retreat quietly. She'd be back with something bigger, nastier, and far more desperate. The next morning, a car door slammed outside my house, followed by two sharp, deliberate knocks on my front door. Not the casual rap of a neighbor, but the official, "We own your day" kind of knock. I opened it to find two impeccably dressed men in dark suits, polished shoes, and sunglasses so reflective I could see my own raised eyebrows staring back. "Mr. Peterson?" the taller one asked, flashing an ID so quickly I only caught federal investigation. "That's me," I replied. "Here to buy Girl Scout cookies, I presume?" Neither man even cracked a smile. The shorter one, stockier with a jawline that could cut glass, spoke next. "We've received a report about classified military equipment stored at your residence. We need to see it immediately." And just like that, I knew. Brenda had gone national. "Of course you have," I said, leaning against the door frame. "Do you have a warrant?" They exchanged a look. "We can get one," the tall one stated. "Good. Do that," I replied, starting to close the door. "Sir," Jawline said, blocking it with his hand, "we'd prefer to handle this quietly." "Oh, I'll bet you would," I retorted. "Unfortunately, so would the HOA president who sent you. And gentlemen, nothing about this situation is quiet anymore." I stepped onto the porch, deliberately loud enough for my nearest neighbors, already peeking through curtains, to hear. "Tell you what, you get your warrant, and while you're at it, tell Brenda to stop trespassing on my property. Oh, and do me a favor, when you come back, bring donuts. It'll make this whole process a lot friendlier." I went back inside before they could respond. By noon, the neighborhood grapevine was on fire. Whispers about federal agents, Brenda exposing a criminal, and the mysterious garage object flew thick and fast. Some eyed me with suspicion, others with curiosity, but a surprising number offered subtle nods of solidarity. The inspection footage had gone viral, and public opinion was firmly against Brenda. Still, this wasn't a game I intended to play passively. Around 3:01 p.m., I spotted Brenda strutting down the sidewalk, a printed packet in hand, stopping at every house as if serving subpoenas. She was in full campaign mode, her voice carrying just enough for me to catch phrases like "danger to our families" and "urgent board action." By the time she reached my house, I was ready. "Brenda," I greeted her, opening the door before she could knock. "Here to sell me on your smear campaign?" She thrust the packet at me like courtroom evidence. "This is a formal petition to have you removed from the community for violating safety standards." I took it, flipped through, and noted that half the signatures belonged to people who'd moved away years ago. "Impressive. You dug up ghosts to vote me out?" Her jaw tightened. "Those are honorary members." "Honorary members, Brenda? This isn't the Knights of the Round Table." She ignored me. "The federal agents will be back with a warrant. When they see what's in there, you'll be facing charges." I smiled. "Brenda, let me explain how warrants work. 1, they need probable cause. 2, they have to convince a judge. And 3, even if they get one, all they'll find is a decommissioned training module I bought legally. So unless you want to be on record for making false reports to federal authorities, you might want to back off." Her face flushed, but she stood her ground. "You can't threaten me." "I'm not threatening you," I said. "I'm warning you. There's a difference." She stormed off without another word, and I knew that was bad news. Brenda never retreated unless she was plotting her next attack. That night, I got my confirmation. A friend who worked part-time at the local storage facility texted me, "Hey, your HOA lady is here, renting a huge unit. She's loading what looks like boxes of files and old HOA junk. She's in a hurry." I didn't need a crystal ball. Brenda was building a case, manufacturing evidence, trying to make it airtight. The next morning, the suits were back, this time with a uniformed officer and a folded sheet of paper. "The warrant, Mr. Peterson," the tall agent announced. "We have authorization to search your property." "Great," I said, stepping aside. "Garage is that way. Don't touch anything else." They moved with the precision of a cartel raid, the officer filming every step. The agents examined the container from every angle before the tall one finally asked for the key. "No key," I said. "Biometric lock, my fingerprint." I pressed my thumb to the scanner. The keypad chirped, the lock clicked, and the lid hissed open. Inside was exactly what I'd described. Empty metal framework, cut wires, panels clearly labeled, "For training use only." The agents exchanged a look, this one far less confident. "This is not what we were told." "Shocking," I deadpanned. "Almost like someone lied to you." The officer turned to me. "Do you want to file a harassment complaint?" I pretended to consider it. "Not yet. I prefer to give people enough rope to hang themselves. By the time they left, Brenda's flimsy plan had crumbled in their hands. But if there was one undeniable truth, it was that cornering someone like Brenda didn't make her back off. It made her reckless. And reckless people make exploitable mistakes. 2 days later, my storage facility friend called again. Dude, you're going to want to see this. Brenda's here with a guy I don't recognize. They're unloading what looks like evidence boxes, but she's not wearing gloves. She's touching everything. I drove over, parked out of sight, and watched. Brenda was pulling files from her SUV, handing them to a man in a leather jacket who looked about as trustworthy as a rattlesnake at a playground. They carried boxes into her rented unit, talking in hushed tones, then drove off in separate directions. That's when the perfect plan crystallized. Not just to stop Brenda, but to ensure she could never come after me again. If I could prove she was fabricating evidence, or, at the very least, hiding official HOA records, she'd be finished. All I needed was the precise moment to catch her in the act. And judging by the look of her operation, that moment was fast approaching. What I didn't anticipate was Brenda escalating before I even made my move. 3 nights later, just after midnight, I was woken by the familiar crunch of tires on gravel. Peeking through the blinds, I saw Brenda's SUV idling at the curb. She got out, flashlight in hand, scanned the street, then crept towards my garage. But this time, no crowbar. She carried a small duffel bag, and the way she moved told me whatever was inside spelled trouble. The flashlight beam trembled across my driveway, betraying her nervousness, which was ironic given she thought she was the predator tonight. I stayed hidden, watching her crouch low as she approached. She paused at the door, set down the bag, and glanced over her shoulder twice. This wasn't a casual peek. This was the calculated behavior of a criminal. I'd expected her return, but the timing was impeccable. I had recently upgraded my security system, cameras, motion sensors, infrared lights, and a microphone sensitive enough to catch a whisper 10 feet away. If Brenda wanted to be the star of another surveillance video, I was more than happy to oblige. She pulled on thin latex gloves, unzipped the bag. Even from my window, I could make out the contents. A stack of documents, small electronics wrapped in bubble wrap, and a silver handgun tucked underneath like an ordinary household item. Oh, Brenda, I thought. Planting evidence? That's a bold strategy. Quietly, I slipped on my shoes, grabbed my phone, and exited through the back door, circling the house so she wouldn't see me. By the time I reached the front corner of the garage, she was kneeling, prying at the side door with a small tool. I let her open it. It's always better to let someone fully cross the line before you confront them. She slipped inside, flashlight beam dancing across the walls until it landed on the container. She hesitated, clearly still unnerved by it, but then shook her head, psyching herself up. She walked over, unzipped the duffel, and began arranging items around the container. Papers fanned out neatly, electronics scattered on the floor, the handgun placed just far enough away to look accidentally dropped. I stepped inside and flipped on the overhead lights. Wow, I said, my voice echoing through the garage. It's like catching Santa Claus, but instead of toys, you bring felony charges. Brenda yelped, spinning so fast she nearly tripped over the duffel. Her face went pale, then blotchy red. I was just breaking and entering again, I finished for her. Or were we going for illegal possession of a firearm this time? Her eyes darted to the camera mounted in the corner, its little red light blinking. This isn't what it looks like, she stammered, backing toward the door. Oh, it looks exactly like what it is, I replied, pulling out my phone and hitting a button. Outside, a loud chirp signaled my security alarm activating, and my driveway instantly lit up like a film set. The high-powered floodlights I'd installed illuminated everything. The open garage, the planted evidence. Brenda standing there like a deer in the world's brightest headlights. Seconds later, another sound joined the scene. Sirens. Not because I'd called them just now, but because I'd set the system to auto-dial the local PD if anyone opened the garage without disarming the alarm. Brenda's panic finally shattered her arrogance. You can't call the police, she blurted. Too late, I said. Also, that's not how innocence works. We didn't wait long. 2 patrol cars pulled up, lights flashing, officers stepping out, immediately assessing the scene. I stayed put, letting the lights and cameras do the talking. "Sir, what's going on here?" one officer asked. I gestured to Brenda. "Caught her breaking into my garage again. This time she brought props. Check the duffel." Brenda's voice shot up an octave. "He's lying. Those aren't mine. He planted them." I tilted my head toward the camera. Security footage begs to differ. It's been recording since she walked up the driveway. The second officer opened the duffel, whistled, and exchanged a knowing glance with his partner. "This yours, ma'am?" "Of course not," she snapped. "That's funny," I said, "because we also have video of you taking each item out of it and placing it around my garage. You might want to check her gloves for prints." "Oh, wait, she's wearing them." "How thoughtful." Brenda's voice cracked. "This is a setup." I smiled. "Yes, yours." The officers didn't arrest her on the spot. Procedure dictated taking statements and securing evidence first. But they did escort her to the curb, away from the garage, while one bagged every item from the duffel. I gave my statement calmly, detailing the timeline and pointing out every camera on my property. By the time they left, Brenda's SUV was still parked, but she was gone. One officer mentioned she'd gone home and the DA's office would be in touch. Translation: she was in deep trouble, but they weren't cuffing her in front of the neighbors just yet. The best part? A dozen neighbors had wandered out during the commotion, drawn by the lights and sirens. They'd seen it all unfold. By morning, the story had already morphed into something even juicier. Half the block thought Brenda was a weapons smuggler, the other half a drug planter. Either way, they all agreed on one thing: she was finished. Except Brenda didn't vanish. 3 days later, she reappeared at an emergency HOA meeting. I went purely for the entertainment. She strode in, blazer on, hair pulled back, trying to project authority. But her hands wouldn't stop shaking. "Fellow board members," she began, "I've been the victim of a vicious campaign to destroy my credibility. Certain individuals have falsified evidence, manipulated security footage, and—" Linda, the usually quietest board member, cut her off. "Brenda, we all saw the video. It's on YouTube. It has 80,000 views." Brenda's jaw dropped. "That's fake. Deep fake technology is—" Frank, the other board member, shook his head. "No, Brenda, I was there. I watched you bring that bag into his garage. I didn't say anything at the time because I didn't want to get involved, but—" He glanced at the audience. "I can't support you anymore." The meeting devolved into a public dismantling. Neighbors stood up, one after another, listing every petty grievance, every abuse of power, every time Brenda had used the HOA to settle personal scores. The board voted unanimously to remove her as president. She didn't even wait for the gavel. She grabbed her purse, stormed out, slamming the door so hard a framed photo fell off the wall. I thought that would be the end. It wasn't. Later that night, a plain white envelope appeared in my mailbox. No return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper, one sentence typed in all caps. "You think you've won, but this isn't over." The letter sat on my kitchen counter all night, a cheap sheet of printer paper that somehow hummed with menace. It wasn't the words. They were classic Brenda, a hollow promise in aggressive caps. It was the delivery. Anonymous. Hidden. Brenda wasn't subtle by nature. If she was resorting to anonymous threats, it meant she was planning something she didn't want tied directly to her. By morning, I had a hunch. Brenda had lost her HOA crown, her allies, her reputation. All she had left was spite, and unrestrained spite is a truly dangerous motivator. I knew she wouldn't attempt another break-in. Too risky for the cameras. No, her next move would be grander, messier, designed to hit me where she thought it would hurt most. I didn't have to wait long. It began with a faint, then unmistakable, heavy grinding rumble from the street. Then the familiar beep, beep, beep of a truck reversing. I stepped outside to see a flatbed tow truck idling. Two men in reflective vests, clipboards in hand, walked up my driveway. "Here for something?" I asked, sipping coffee. "Yeah," one said, not looking at me. "Order to impound a vehicle registered to this address." My eyebrows shot up. "Really? That's fascinating, considering my car's right there." I pointed to my perfectly legal, fully registered sedan. That's the one, the man said, already walking toward it. Not so fast, I interjected. Who gave the order? He flipped through his clipboard. Says here, authorization from the Homeowners Association president. I smiled. That's interesting, because we don't have one. Before he could respond, a familiar voice sliced through the air. They do. I'm still the president until the end of the fiscal term. Brenda stood halfway down the block, arms crossed, a self-satisfied grin plastered on her face, wearing her sash like a security blanket. Brenda, the board voted you out. Remember storming out of the meeting? That was illegal, she shrieked back. The bylaws say I remain president until a successor is formally appointed, which means I still have the authority to enforce community rules. And what rule did my car break? I asked. She smirked. Improper storage of hazardous materials in a residential garage. The vehicle is being seized as evidence. The tow truck drivers looked profoundly uncomfortable, clearly realizing they'd been dragged into a petty war. Sir, if you have paperwork proving she's not president— Oh, I've got something better, I said, pulling out my phone. Mind if I make a quick call? I didn't call the police. Not yet. Instead, I called Frank, the newly appointed acting HOA president. It took him 30 seconds to walk down from his house, clutching the meeting minutes, signed by every board member, formally documenting Brenda's removal. Frank handed the papers to the tow truck driver. She has zero authority, he stated. If you try to take that car, you'll be complicit in theft. The drivers exchanged a look, shrugged, and walked back to their truck. Brenda's grin vanished as the flatbed pulled away. You're making a mistake siding with him, she screamed at Frank. Frank didn't even look at her. Go home, Brenda. She spun and stomped off, but the rigid set of her shoulders warned me she wasn't done. I was right. That night, around 11 p.m., my living room went dark. Not the usual quick flicker of a storm, but a sustained outage. The fridge hummed to a stop. Outside, the streetlights were still on, meaning the problem was localized to my house. I grabbed a flashlight and checked my main breaker in the garage. Fine. But when I stepped outside to the exterior utility box, the padlock was cut clean through. The cover hung open, a tangle of severed wires dangling like spaghetti. She'd cut my power. It was a stupid move, not just illegal, but easily traceable. Yet the sheer pettiness of it made me pause. This wasn't about winning anymore. This was about making my life a living hell, which meant she wouldn't stop until I made it impossible for her to remain in the neighborhood. The next morning, I set that final plan in motion. Step 1, file a police report for vandalism with matching security footage. Step 2, ensure that footage didn't just sit in an evidence locker, it went public. I sent it to the same neighbor who'd uploaded the first video of Brenda's break-in. By lunchtime, HOA Brenda Cuts Power Lines was trending locally. Step 3, the most crucial. I'd been digging since her first break-in, poring over public records and old HOA documents. What I found was illuminating. Brenda had a history of mismanaging HOA funds, payments to non-existent contractors, inflated landscaping invoices, even a mysterious $4,000 charge labeled community improvement that perfectly coincided with her kitchen remodel. I compiled everything into a neat dossier and sent it to 2 places: the district attorney's office and every single mailbox in the neighborhood. The fallout was instantaneous. By evening, my phone was exploding with texts from neighbors, thanking me, cursing her, or sending screenshots of their own Brenda horror stories. 2 days later, I arrived home to a moving truck in front of Brenda's house. She was on the porch, screaming into her phone, while movers carried out boxes. You think you've won? She shrieked when she saw me. I shrugged. I don't think, Brenda. I know. She pointed a trembling finger. I'll be back. You can't keep me out. I smiled. Actually, I can. See, I spoke to the new HOA board. We've updated the bylaws. Any homeowner with a felony conviction or pending charges can't live here. And judging by the 3 separate cases you've got open right now, I'd say you're about to be very ineligible. Her face went stark white. For once, she had no comeback. She just turned away, muttering under her breath as she climbed into her SUV. The movers finished. The truck pulled away. And just like that, Brenda was gone. The neighborhood felt different after that. Quieter, lighter, like a persistent pebble had finally been removed from your shoe. People waved more. Kids played freely without being scolded for noise violations. HOA meetings actually ended on time. As for the container in my garage, I left it, not because I needed it anymore, but as a silent monument. A reminder that some people will push endlessly until you push back harder. And when you do, it's not enough to simply win the battle. You must ensure they can never return for another round. The first time I pulled into my driveway, without wondering if she'd leap out from behind a bush, I realized something profound. It wasn't just my garage she tried to control, it was my peace. And now finally, that peace was mine again. Though just in case, I kept the security cameras rolling. You never know when another Brenda might move in.